have a saying in Palauan, when you teach your children, it's best to do so when they're eating, because the food and the lessons are consumed at the same time. So this would be a very informative lunch session today. We have heard and seen a lot of very important, very informative information that I'm sure our policymakers here today will be very happy to look into and use those to shape the next steps to help us in our recovery journey. And as important and as vital those information are to all of us, sometimes statistics and data and charts and all these wonderful presentations sort of give us a very dry and sometimes feels less personal information about where our economic situation is. Sometimes we don't always relate that directly to the human being behind the data. So this lunch session we have a very special presentation. There will be a launch of this report. It will be the first time it's launched in Palau. And I love the title of the report, Uncertain Times, Unsettled Lives, Shaping Our Future in the Transforming World. And that pretty much put all the discussions we had this morning into a nutshell. But we do have a very good presentation to be made to this lunch. And so if I may ask Kevin from the UNDP, he's going to give our presentation this morning. And also may ask Vice President Udo Silva Senior to please come up as well to the table up here for the presentation. Please. So our session this morning, or this lunchtime, we'll have Kevin give us the presentation, a summary of that report, followed by our Vice President. Thank you so much.
Ali and Tutau. Your Excellency, Madam Honorable Vice President and Minister of Justice, Minister of Finance, Cabinet members, Senators, House of Delegates, Governors, Diplomatic Corps, Ambassadors, Traditional Leaders, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for inviting the United Nations Development Program to contribute to these important discussions. In particular, the ability to launch the Human Development Report in the Pacific here in Palau, which will be the first time we've been able to do that. We did launch the report globally in September, and then Asia Pacific regionally in October, and we had the honor of having Madam Vice President represent not only the Republic of Palau at that launch, but also Asia Pacific, where the launch was held in Bhutan. The presentation that I have today is around uncertain times, unsettled lives, shaping our future in a transforming world. We are indeed living in a time of great uncertainty. We saw in the projections today, there are many development outcomes that can be realized, and it will be the people in this room to make those decisions for the future here in Palau. The COVID-19 pandemic, the conflict, we've had more people in conflict than any time since World War II at this point. Record-breaking temperatures, fires, and storms, and humanity's biggest challenges, the climate and biodiversity crises. Inequalities and political polarization, technological upheavals are pulling and piling up and feeding off each other. The uncertainty is unsettling lives everywhere. Hope needs to be rekindled. And I'm going to say that again about this idea of hope. Each one of us have a hope for ourselves, for our families, our communities, and our countries. And this hope needs to be rekindled. Many people no longer believe that they will be able to give their children better lives than the ones they've lived. And this is why we in UNDP have put out in this new Human Development Report this title of Uncertain Times, Unsettled Lives, Shaping Our Future in a Transforming World. The human development approach argues that genuine development should seek to expand the richness of lives, not just the economy. The first Human Development Report was released in 1990, and it began with a powerful idea: people are the real wealth of nations. Every report since then has built on this and sought to understand development issues as they affect people's lives day to day. This report is no different. The world is lurching from crisis to crisis, trapped in a cycle of firefighting and unable to tackle the roots of the troubles that confront us. Life has always been uncertain, but uncertainty is changing, affected by how humans are changing the planet and by increasing polarization and societal transformation. Not only are these occurring at an unprecedented speed and scale, but they are interacting with each other. The last 2 years have had a devastating impact for billions of people in the world, when different crises have hit back to back and interacted with sweeping social and economic shifts, dangerous planetary changes, and massive increases in polarization. It's no accident that the world is being hammered by multiple crises at once: COVID-19 and the invasion of Ukraine escalating global food insecurity. But what does this mean for human development? So if we go to the next slide, we can see in the 30 years since we've been tracking the Human Development Index, some 90% of countries saw their HDI decrease in either 2020 or 2021. We did not even see these types of changes during the global financial crisis. It is unprecedented, and in a way, it has brought us back to 2016 development, to where we were then, which was the beginning of the Sustainable Development Goals. So we have regressed globally. And in 2022, global human development declined again since the first time we had been calculating it. On the next slide, here in the Pacific, according to the Human Development Index, Fiji, Palau, Tonga, and Samoa show the highest human development outcomes and are in the high human development group. The Federated States of Micronesia, Kiribati, the Republic of the Marshall Islands, Tuvalu, and Vanuatu are in the medium human development group, with the Solomon Islands and Papua New Guinea. The report highlights that a key source of inequality within countries is the gap in opportunities, achievements, and empowerment between women and men. Worldwide, the average Human Development Index for women is a full 4% lower than for men, due to women's lower income and educational attainment in many countries. On the next slide, stress has been rising, and we've all been living through this. We know this personally. The feeling of insecurity are on the rise nearly everywhere, a trend at least a decade in the making. even before COVID-19 pandemic. More than 6 in 7 people worldwide felt insecure. As you can see, there's evidence that stress is linked to inequality. Here you see the difference in stress by levels of education. Feeling of insecurity are increasing in most countries and surging in some of the world's most developed nations. This stress and insecurity is bad in itself, of course, but also bad for almost every aspect of development, because as we shall see, insecurity compromises our collective ability to rise to challenges. As you can see, the planet has some very significant challenges. This report provides an original take on what is happening, on why we are seeing these twin paradoxes of progress with insecurity and progress with polarization. Uncertainty, the report argues, is changing. We're entering a new phase of uncertainty, and our future increasingly defies prediction. This diagram is at the heart of the report's analysis about how the world is changing. We have always lived with uncertainty. There is nothing new in disease or war or even poverty, but today there are 3 major and new layers that are interacting with uncertainty of life in ways we have not experienced before. First, we see there are now destabilizing planetary pressures. We see this in climate impacts. Second, we're beginning to see sweeping societal transformations to ease those pressures. And third, there's widespread polarization. These 3 factors are generating new, complex, interacting sources of uncertainty for the world and everyone in it. These new facets of life in 2022 are interacting with crises in ways that are increasingly unpredictable. And this new uncertainty complex is taking its toll in many ways, in many places. In particular, it is unsettling and upending billions of lives all over the planet in a variety of ways. Looking at our mental well-being and psychological resilience, there are sounding alarms that 1 in 8 people are suffering mental health disorders and record levels of sadness and stress, now 10 percentage points higher than a decade ago. When people are anxious or depressed, they are much less likely to have the capacity or even the desire to change. So what is the path for transformation? And at the beginning, I very specifically was talking about the word of hope that each one of us holds for transforming our future. This report seeks to answer a very important question. If we know what we as a world ought to be doing to tackle these great challenges we face, then why are we not doing it already? We know, for example, we have to reduce fossil fuel emissions. At COP27 right now, Palau is advocating for these aspects. Yet, year on year, they rise, and they continue to rise. We know the benefits that can come to every society from tackling inequality, yet there's still a great deal to be done. There are many reasons, and I will talk about them in a second, but first, please do remember there is a great deal to be hopeful about, and the growing mismatch between the world as it really is and conventional ways of understanding and doing things is an opportunity to do something new. So we have this idea of the 3 I's around investment, insurance, and innovation. Policies that focus, if we move to the next slide, on investment, from renewable energy to preparedness for pandemics and extreme natural hazards, to ease planetary pressures, insurance, including social protection to prepare our societies for the contingencies in an uncertain world, innovation in its many forms, technological, economic, cultural, to respond to the unknown challenges that humanity will face. This slide looks at some of them, and there is much to be done here. And actually this morning, we've heard a lot of these policy ideas coming out. Many traditional approaches to public policy, from education to finance, are rooted in the past. Institutions need to adapt to the world as it is today in order to achieve the future we aspire to tomorrow. They must go beyond setting new policies to interact with social movements and shape new norms and values. How do we enable cultural change? Looking at the next slide. People's social and physical surroundings can be very powerful. Just look at the enormous power of social movements in this day and age, movements that can generate enormous change very quickly. It is important to also note that people need to be empowered. Navigating uncertainty requires open and inclusive dialogue to explore what communities want for their futures. Change such as green transitions are vital for our future. We also now understand that evidence alone is not enough to change people's minds. We must widen our understanding of human behavior to recognize the roles of emotions, cognitive biases, and culture. Ultimately, where do we go from here? To navigate these uncertainty, we need to double down on human development and look beyond simply seeking to improve people's wealth or health, important as they are. We also need to protect the planet and provide people with the tools they need to feel more secure, to regain a sense of control over their lives, and to have hope for the future. This is genuine human development. By unlocking our human potential, by tapping into our creativity and diversity, anchored in trust and solidarity, it challenges us to imagine and create futures in which we thrive. And I'll just end with the encouraging words of the late great poet and civil rights activist Maya Angelou. To bring all our energies to each encounter, to remain flexible enough to notice and admit what we expected to happen did not happen. We need to remember that we are creative, and can invent new scenarios as frequently as they are needed. And I saw that this morning, and I can see that for the future here, and thank you very much.
Now may I request Madam Vice President to please come up and give us her response to this. Thank you.
Malungil swel, I'm speaking on the Palau context. I'd like to begin by reading the preamble of our Constitution. I think therein lies the hope that we are talking about. We hear it in the preamble. In exercising our inherent sovereignty, we, the people of Palau, proclaim and reaffirm our immemorial right to be supreme in these islands of Palau, our homeland. We renew our dedication to preserve and enhance our traditional heritage, our national identity, and our respect for peace, freedom, and justice for all mankind. In establishing this Constitution of the Sovereign Republic of Palau, we venture into the future with full reliance on our own efforts and the divine guidance of Almighty God. So, I'll just ask for just a few seconds and say something in Palauan, and then I'll revert back. Sel dumak ngartial mga doa te ergidar maasar belaw. Kidal maasal kloangar aledra adalang akled matoera aigal alngia belwath. So I was saying that As a woman, a Palauan woman, we are also very much aware of this, the threats to our environment, especially climate change. As Vice President of Palau, I am also chair of the National Emergency Committee that deals with response and recovery of natural disasters. I grew up with a mother who never worked in government. She planted tapioca and supported her family. Every time a typhoon came through, that's going to destroy whatever money she's going to get from selling the tapioca. So it is a real threat, these natural disasters that are more frequent, more severe storms that we are seeing. The taro patches are being inundated with seawater when the king tides come in. So in addition to the conflicts, geopolitical conflicts that we are facing that affect us here in Palau. So we must look at not only the richness of our economy, we need to look at the people, the richness of our tradition. And again, therein lies the hope. We need to be able to strengthen our community relationships, our clans, and be able to strengthen our young people. Another challenge we're facing here in Palau that is very sad is we're losing a lot of our young people. Suicide, just on this year, a lot of young men. So again, those are threats that are put on to our well-being, our mental well-being. So Palau is in the high human development. And we're a peaceful country. So the challenges that I laid out in the HDR is whether there is a way to ensure that the people of Palau feel safer, more equal, and happier. So governments and businesses and communities have to reshape the world to redistribute more income to the poor and the disadvantaged. And I must say that it's highlighted here. I'm the output 3. We are also helping with vulnerable communities. We are also out doing community awareness for the prevention of domestic violence. Our statistics here in Palau is 25%. 1 out of every 4 women will face domestic violence in their lifetime here in Palau. So we need to be able to call for increased protection measures for the vulnerable members of our community. As vulnerable small islands, developing state, Palau needs increased global action on climate change, as I have talked about the effects of it. Palau has long called for increased and adequate financing for climate change in a way which enables easier access to funds by small island developing states. This will give people greater faith in their governments and businesses when we are able to assist them and follow through on the commitments that we have made. In the case of finance, it is vital for Palau and nations like it to take immediate action. For example, a promise made by developed countries in 2012 to provide $100 billion in climate change finance per year by 2020 still has not been reached. However, we must not despair, as there is still hope and optimism for the future if we make changes now. The HDR highlights that there's a still huge amount of opportunity and benefit in investing in opportunities, especially for the poor, women, and youth. The world needs to continue to improve equitable access to food, clean water by diversifying the sources and types. So in Palau, remembering our strong emphasis on the importance of family bonds, customary community support systems can help reduce the risk to our most vulnerable populations. Dealing with this risk is not the sole function of governments and businesses. We need to take action as individuals. So I'm so excited to be able to usher in this launching here in Palau. Because here in Palau, as you know, women are already matriarchs of our society. And we have opportunities and choices, especially in running for public office. We see women in public office, we see women at the center of community organizations. So again, at the end, we have hope here in Palau, and we are moving forward and continuing to strengthen our communities, one woman and men and child at a time. Thank you so much.
At this time, we will hear the message by a video from the Bhutan, Minister of Bhutan? Yes, sorry about that. We will have the video right now, and after that, we'll take a quick break, and we will have a panel up in a few minutes. Thank you.
My greetings to you from the Kingdom of Bhutan. My apologies for not being able to join you in person, but my commitments in Bhutan requires me to be here at this moment. I hope this recorded message for your launch and the discussion of 2022 Human Development Report is a success. It's my immense pleasure to be here to attend this very important event, the Palau launch of 2022 Human Development Report, titled Uncertain Times, Unsettled Lives. Bhutan had the privilege to host the Asia-Pacific regional launch of the report, and we were honored with an intervention from Honorable Vice President. I would like to thank the Government of Palau, the United Nations Development Program, for this invitation, and my greeting goes to Vice President of Palau, the Palau Minister of Finance, and the Deputy Resident Representative, Kevin Petrini. I would also like to further extend my greetings to all the guests, those in person and those joining remotely. Let me begin by looking back in history. The 1990 landmark Human Development Report articulated the concept of human progress with the foresight statement that people are the real wealth of the nation. And the fundamental goal of development is to create an enabling environment for people to live long, healthy, and creative lives. This 1990 development decades became a turning point to shift the development discourse from economic-centric to a people-centric. This notion of human development resonates so well with the Bhutan's development ideology of gross national happiness, GNH. Simply put, both have the multidimensional perspective towards development, and both rejects the idea of relentless pursuit of economic prosperity and growth at an expense of non-economic dimensions of well-being. For Bhutan, the gross national happiness has been a unifying force behind the country's policies and plans for decades now. While we initially struggled with the conceptual and methodological problems of quantifying GNH, continuous attempt consequently led to formulation of GNH Index. We now use the GNH Index to better assess and monitor the societal progress across 9 key areas, so-called 9 domains, from mental health, psychological and spiritual well-being, to a relational well-being in communities, to creativity and cultural diversity, to health and education, living standard, governance, environment, and even time use to prevent overworking or sleep deprivation. Over time, the GNH Index has been able to capture the global attention, and like the Human Development Index, it is championing the cause of an alternative form of measuring development. Since 1990, the Human Development Index ranks over 188 countries, creating a potential base for a comparative study with other countries. Bhutan's Human Development Index value has gradually doubled in the past 3 decades now. Today, Bhutan ranks 127th out of 191 countries with an HDI value of a medium human development. Since 1990, life expectancy at birth has increased from 53 years to 70 years now. Expected years of schooling have increased to 13 years. Similarly, Bhutan's gross national index per capita accelerated almost 7-fold. While we may have had a steady rise in all these 3 HDI indicators on health, education, and income, as a nation we continue to face a myriad of complex challenges. We are still resource-driven, dictated by one or few resources, making our economy volatile and vulnerable. We need to prioritize and pursue a productivity-led growth to ensure that it's more resilient, inclusive, and equitable. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I must say that the report you are discussing and launching today, titled Uncertain Times, Unsettled Lives, Shaping Our Future in the World in a Transformation, is a befitting title given the challenges that we are experiencing today. We are facing multiple problems manifested in various forms and intensities, from an ongoing COVID-19 pandemic to worsening climate impacts, from a devastating humanitarian crisis to rising inflation, including political and economic turmoil. The report rightly recommends doubling down on human development to help us navigate the future and unleash people's potential to be an agent of change. Policies that focus on investment, insurance, and innovation will enable people to thrive in the face of uncertainties. Investment from a renewable energy to a preparedness for pandemics and extreme natural hazards to ease planetary pressures. Insurance, including social protections, and to prepare our societies for contingencies for an uncertain world, and innovation in its many forms, technological, economic, cultural, to respond to the unknown challenges that humanity will face as we face uncertainties. It is reassuring to witness a rise in Bhutan's HDI score despite immense challenges we faced as a nation over the past 2 years. However, I note that many countries in the Pacific, including Palau, have faced a weakening of their HDI in the last 2 years. I must say that the pandemic brought with it some of the greatest lessons. It taught us to be more agile, adaptive, and innovative to better respond to the crisis and come out stronger and more resilient. We quickly moved to digital technology for service delivery, which abruptly eliminated the traditional method of in-person citizen engagement. We saw public agencies collaborating with the private sector and co-created digital solutions such as Duk Trace app, Bhutan vaccine system, electronic payment and procurement system, e-commerce platforms, amongst others. Our education system quickly adapted to virtual classrooms. In a way, the pandemic became a catalyst for rapid innovation and experimentation in the public sector. This trend has to be further nurtured and protected. I would like to conclude by recognizing UNDP for continuously advocating human development and pushing governments to consider and include the voices of people in the development agenda. We hope the meeting and the discussion today in Palau will spark an insightful discussions about the future of the world and Bhutan in particular, evidence-informed policymaking, and further growth and development in the region. With this, I thank you and Tashdile. My greetings to you from the Kingdom of Bhutan. My apologies for not
Minister, that is, just kind of give a soul to this very, informative symposium we have to be able to, look at the human development, which is why we are all here today. All the data, all the research, all that information is really targeted at empowering individuals. But sometimes in these discussions, we tend to forget that because we're looking at cold, hard facts. So this next part of our session, before we do it, please let's all give Kevin and our Honorable Vice President a big hand of applause for their contribution. Thank you. And while they're getting back to their seats, may I ask our panelists to make their way to the front. We have with us former Minister of Cultural Affairs, Faustina Roor. She is, am I seeing you or do I need my glasses? Okay, that's you. Also come up to the front, and we have Villani as well, Ramangasaw. Yes, please, for our panelists this morning, this afternoon. Again, while our panelists are coming forward, I am reminded not too long ago of somebody making a comment to me about the Palau's ranking. We are a high GDP country. And it says, where are these people in Palau that are high GDP? Putting us all on this bracket that none of us feel like we belong to. And I think, as already mentioned in the presentations today, COVID, where's the third person? Okay, please may I have the other panelists come up? Oh, Sam, I'm sorry, Sam. Sam Scott from Palau Chamber of Commerce, please to come up as our third panelist. Our fourth panelist wasn't able to make it. I think he's still in Egypt for the climate change conference. With this pandemic, those issues we have, has been mentioned by different people, has been exacerbated. So we all know that the happiness index, if we have one, have slid down a little bit. But we have with us our three panelists. We have the representative from the disability and Bango as well, from Palau. We have, of course, our former minister who is very embedded in our culture. And then also we have Sam Scott, who is with our private sector. And they will each give their perspectives of how, they see Palau in terms of this Human Development Report. And after that, we can have a short Q&A with them before we do the launch, official launch photo. Thank you. This is Palau. We'll start with the women.
Dia ka belang aruba ka mamong. The men go first, so if there's war, they take the shots and the women go safe, right? So, arsa alam ako tol mga sa kudobasyo ka mangkaw.
Salange, Tina. All right, well, wow, I don't really know what exactly I should be saying right now because I'm a bit shy and I really haven't had an opportunity to read this report in its full volume that it consists of. As we talk about unsettled lives and unsettled times, and I know being a representative of not only the private sector with the Palau Chamber of Commerce, but also somebody who's been involved in the tourism industry for over 32 years in the Republic of Palau. It's definitely been challenging. And luckily, the government of Palau has been very helpful for the private sector when it comes to assistance, financial assistance, both with our employees that have been laid off, but also with financing through the National Development Bank, which has been very beneficial to us in the tourism industry who have struggled these last 2.5 years. And we're very grateful to have had the support, and that on both the national government level as well as the bank, the National Development Bank's level, they did, have our backs and did watch out for us and did everything that they possibly could do to assist the tourism sector and try to keep us, I guess what you might say, afloat. And it's been very beneficial. Without that support, we would have sank, no question. But as the Human Development Report indicates, there's the measure of the progress of human capacity in the relevant areas. As we progress forward into the future, and it's been very exciting to be part of this economic symposium, and I cannot thank Minister Odui, Minister of Finance, for allowing the private sector to be involved in this. But as we continue forward, obviously, we need to take and take heed of the challenges that face us as we're progressing into the future. And Palau, is probably a lot more fortunate than other countries in this western, northern Pacific area. Maybe we're not as fortunate as much as Guam and Saipan, who are a little more centrally based and have a lot easier access to airline capacity. But Palau also, before the pandemic, obviously we had at least 30 some flights a week coming into Palau, and that was a very what I would almost call Palau's heyday. And I know 2020 was looking to be an extreme year, or a great year for us all in the tourism industry and for the economy of Palau, as well as the government in relation to taxes that were going to be generated. But then we all know what happened. As we continue to work and make changes, for building capacity and making sure that we have enough people and human resources to fulfill the needs of what we hope to be once again a growing industry in the tourism sector, that we hope to see the ability to hopefully decrease the outflux or the outbound of both local Palauan labor as well as foreign labor. We just kind of keep our fingers crossed for a very positive and great future in hopes that Palau has the resiliency to continue forward into the future with hopefully a good labor force to meet the needs of the private sector. I don't really know what else to say. I'm sorry. But I will just go ahead and close my remarks, and obviously I know there's going to be questions, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions that come forth, but at this time I'll go ahead and turn the mic over. Thank you.
Ali Gungil Tulial Shields. First of all, thank you, Minister of Finance, Vice President, and people representing overseas guests and organizers. Leila Nigel Lolokos o Vice President Angel Minister Abutan. I echo what our VP said in regards to Palauan society and organizations and culture. I also echo very much what Minister of Finance from Bhutan mentioned, because we have been talking about for quite a while in terms of GDH or GNH. And as we all know, Bhutan was the first country to look into that and to actually factor that into their development. So it's not just economic development, but actually people who actually live and make sure the countries and the villages tick. So I'm here representing the civil societies, and I've been working with the civil societies for quite a while. I have a small sort of consulting firm, NGO, where we actually work with them and help them in their paperwork. But I'd like to talk about just 3 items this afternoon, because we were told that we have about 3-4 minutes. First is the economics of culture. I think we often mention about, we got a Klebelau, but how much has really that been factored into our development in terms of our economics, in terms of our different types of development within our society? And Minister, Senator Songbao, you mentioned also we have 3 banks here, and how many times a week either kamaldi lang aldadu or whatever. I just, on my way here, our funeral home services was packed. And how much is actually collected every time there is our cultural gathering or event? And so therefore, is that being factored into our economic development, as been mentioned by many people? And how do we measure that? Are there mechanisms in terms of going about putting that into the overall economic sector in our society? And it's the civil society people, organizations, men and women, traditional or creative organizations that actually make the villages tick. They're the ones who make sure the waterways are cleared and cleaned. They're the ones who make sure the farmlands are organized and tilled and planted. They're the ones who run the village markets. They sell. And so when there is typhoon or storm, they really are affected. Their farmlands are affected. And then after the storm is over, then they have to clear the trees and the bananas and all and so forth. So I think we kind of need to sort of look at this very important human development. And there are those who probably are not here VP because the funeral and other cultural events that they have to attend to. Yeah, so, and so same thing with the economics of culture, the economics of our natural resources. How do the village people, the fishermen, who make sure the waterways and the mangroves and the reefs are there to sustain the livelihood of the people, either we go fishing for our homes or to market and to sell. And so those are some of the issues that I think we need to look at, because the report that was mentioned, the PP report that you did, yeah, I mean, there's stress. Stress is really, and mental problems in our youth, our young people. But have you looked, we have measured the stress level, but are we going to measure the happiness level? And how do we go about putting that into the overall realm of our village and community development for the overall nation of Palau? The other one that I like to mention is our young people in the villages. And VP, you mentioned about out-migration and keeping our people in Palau. I mean, we all know that Palau has less than 20,000 who actually live here. And many of us are Guam, Hawaii, or US mainland. And so bringing them back is a challenge for our leaders. I see a lot of senators and ministers here. How do we actually go about reversing the trend? Because we talk about remittance from Palauans overseas who work. They're the ones who actually contribute to our cultural events here. They're the ones who sort of contribute to our building of homes. So the remittance is actually not going out, but most of it is coming in. But however, they are also going out because parents send money to their kids while they go to school. They probably pay their apartments and tuition and whatnot. So there's actually back and forth, but it's not really like you support your children, and they in turn they go work, and then they support families, whether it's family, clans, or lineages. And so I just want to mention that, and I thank the organizers and the reports that's been put out, and that's it. Thank you.
Miss 12, ngarangal Arbelaw. I'm here represent the voices of persons with disabilities, Rablo Arbelaw. I guess ang we say Rablo Arbelaw na ratified sa UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities sa 2013. Next year ang mo 10 years. So it's almost a decade. Kita other Belao. So commitment that our leaders sa Rablo Belao not to agid Blur Belao not to Rablo Adam ne ratify all tel convention el meaning adol tau talamal tirar adan nga nya litatril kir Belao. Akaseng lamal tirar adan nga nya litatril ling kanda kadto swadan mo discriminate tar ko adrangot el Belao al nga nya litatril kir Rablo Belao. So Martiang direct lumnas mase sa dito disability ngara balkule ko raw. I mean, what does it mean? Ngalitut tangara tigal persons with disabilities. Who are persons with disabilities? Say the question that we put in the back of our mind. And according to convention, in tigel adal ngaringia physical, mental impairments, or nowadays we say it's psychosocial impairments. They are sensory impairments who are deaf and blind. They are who are still invisible impairments. Stress. We're talking about stress. According to WHO, depression is the leading cause of disability. So we say we have so many of our brothers and sisters who are out in the streets. They are persons with psychosocial disabilities. They are persons with intellectual disabilities. Yet they face all challenges in access to education, health, employment, and other basic services that you can name. Though we have made progress in efforts on disaster risk reduction, climate change, but yet we still have a long road to go. I mean, the political ownership of disability inclusion, where is it in our country? It's not only lies in the government, it's the whole of society. Disability inclusion is not just ticking the box. It's not just to ensure persons with disabilities are included. It's to ensure services are equal for them. We see the high rates of NCDs, and those are results of persons with disabilities. They become persons with disabilities. My recommendations here is that to ensure inclusion of persons with disabilities, there are preconditions that we must meet. Accessibility. When we say accessibility, we always think of physical context, but it's actually accessibility to information communication. Where do persons with disabilities fit in terms of accessibility? Not only transportation and facilities, but in terms of information and communication. Assistive devices, assistive products, my wheelchair, do I need to pay out of my own cost, or is it covered in our medical insurance? Support services, I came with a person pushing me, and I need a personal assistant. So if I work in the government or in private sectors, do I pay for it, or is it covered? Social protection, this is very famous across the country in terms of disability. Social protection, we say we have famous here in Palau, a former minister, a disability stipend, but we have seen challenges with it. Is it inclusive for all? Is it inclusive for persons with disabilities? Is it tying up with our social security disability benefits, pension disability benefits? What else? Community-based inclusive development. As I said, disability is not just for the government, it's the whole society. It's the government, it's civil society, organization of persons with disabilities, private sectors, academic institutions, churches, and individuals. Partnership built at the core of Leave No One Behind principles is key to progressing development for persons with disabilities in this post-COVID world. Consideration for the meaningful engagement and participation of persons with disabilities in government policies, partners' initiatives, donors' investment, both bilateral and multilateral. So again, it's not just ticking the box, it's a genuine partnership, the whole community. Excellencies, in conclusion, forward movement is not true progress if you do not address the needs of all persons, including persons with disabilities. Sulang.
I was so busy listening to that, I forgot I was the moderator. This opportunity to ask questions of our panelists. If you have any questions, please raise your hand. Let me ask everyone to give these three persons a big hand of applause for their contribution to our panel this morning. I think what, if I may summarize what has been said, and this is really relevant to the discussion we had today. One is when you're talking about the status of our country, our economic performance, our well-being, we're talking about people, we're talking about persons. We're talking about access to services. We're talking about inclusivity, not just as Viliani said, ticking off the box. We are actually embedded in our systems the policies that address the needs and provide everybody, not just financial support, but also access to information. Sam mentioned that our government stepped in during the worst times to help our businesses, our employees to survive. But even after a year and a half, when the businesses were, when the doors reopened and we're starting to look at recovery, there is a sense of uncertainty still there. And there is a mental stress on businesses as well, on employers who are thinking, should I move on? Should I invest in my business? Is tomorrow, will we see the benefits coming in tomorrow? Will we see this progress that we can depend on or am I going to let all my employees go and start anew? So there's still uncertainty there, and it is mentioned in this report, and we hope that during these discussions that these are taken into considerations. And Tina mentioned about the cultural structures and facilities in place. These are also opportunities of hope. These are structures in place that as we move forward, we can look at our traditional structures for a way forward. How do they deal with recovery and disasters? How do they strengthen their communities? And maybe these are some of the pathways that we could follow. We could develop our policies into it and utilize the existing structures. So thank you once again for that very informative supplement to our report. And at this time, may I ask our Vice President, our Minister of Finance, and who else? And I'm sorry, Senator Mario and Delegate Kanay to please come up and let's do an official launch of this development report for Palau and for the Pacific. Thank you. And no, please don't go yet. Let's stay there and be part of the photo. I think this would be appropriate for this segment. Also, yes, Kevin from UNDP. Maybe here. Yes, please. Yes.
Maybe Minister of Finance and Vice President, if you could.
Thank you all, everyone. Let's please give them one more hand of applause, please. And that concludes our session on the launching of the Human Development Report of 2022. Thank you.
I'd like to just make one comment about remittance before we move on to the next part of the agenda. I had an opportunity to go to Kosovo, maybe it was last month in October, at the invitation of the president of Kosovo, a very young woman, Osmani. She is 40 years old. When I went to Kosovo, I met with a minister, a woman minister of Foreign Affairs and Diaspora. I said, wow, that's the first time I've heard of a Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Diaspora. What do you do with Diaspora? And she says, we have a lot of people from Kosovo who left because of the war. And they are now living in other parts of Europe, and they support the government. They send in remittance to help the government. And being, maybe a legal background, they said, do you have to sign a contract with them? Did you need to send off, enter into agreement with them so they can send money into the government? And she looked at me, and I felt very embarrassed because she looked at me and said, we survived genocide. They want to make sure that we continue to exist as a people. And so what they do is they have an account within the government. And the people of Kosovo who have since moved and had children and grandchildren and live in Germany and other parts of Europe send in money to assist the government in its operations. They have their young people who have never lived there, who do not speak the language, but they take a year sabbatical from their positions as technical experts on, computers, every kind of profession. They go back home to go there to work for a year just to help build the country. I say. We need to reach out to diaspora. Tirigel adadal nga rakwam mahaway ma. Amrigel who've been there for generations. Sel obong. When you go to the US, I campaign to the US makmadangay. I go there to ask for votes. I am amazed at the number of young children. Because you know what? They have better maternity leave, which we do not have here. Parental leave. Better benefits. Marangalgira sa ilo mael. And there are big communities. Appoint nga ka osemla mo gira dal morning segidil ministry ra diaspora gid and reach out to our people and say be part of the nation building. Kasenkyor Belao, be part of the nation building. Thank you. Aktineswa ka talk about remittance that way.